developments in the Republic of Benin, where military personnel have announced that they have removed President Patrice Talon from office. But this morning, conflicting signals are emerging about who is really in control. A group of soldiers identifying themselves as the Military Committee for Refoundation appeared on a state television on Sunday, declaring that President Patrice Talon had been ousted and his government dissolved. They stated that the committee had met with decided that Mr. Patrice Talon is removed from office as a president of the Republic. However, sources close to the president say Talon is safe and that loyalist forces are already moving to regain control of key state institutions. Interior Minister Alassane Soidou described the soldiers' announcement as a mutiny aimed at destabilizing the country and its institutions. This attempted takeover comes amid a wave of political instability across the region following recent coups in Madagascar and Guinea-Bissau and earlier power seizures in the neighboring Niger and Burkina Faso. Benin itself has a long history of coups and attempted coups, but for now, the situation in Cotonou remains fluid, with a real balance of power still uncertain. Meanwhile, in the meantime, the Economic Community of West African States has strongly condemned the attempted military takeover in the Republic of Benin. Military personnel in Benin on a Sunday announced that they had ousted President Patrice Talon, although his entourage said he was safe and the army was regaining control. Reacting to the statement it released in Abuja on Sunday, the West African bloc said it received the report of the attempted coup with dismay, calling for full respect of the Constitution of Benin. The regional bloc also saluted the efforts of the government and the Republican Army in bringing the situation under control. And also joining us for this discussion to discuss, of course, the development and what the recent events in West Africa mean for the future of the democratic governance are regional coordinators, Institute for Security Studies, Dr Wole Ojewale, African Affairs Analyst, and Achike Chude, and foreign policy expert Bolu Michael-Biyi. Well, I'll start with you. What's really driving this surge in military takeovers across West Africa?
Well, I think two things. One is the fact that there's a legitimacy crisis that is hanging over some of the recently elected or those who have occupied presidential office for a while in West Africa now. And there's also the possibility of what I would describe as the coup contagion. So if others can do it in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Guinea, then other countries' military authorities in those places also feel they can make such attempts. I think that is also one of the factors that is driving this. The third one is the fact that when assessing power or state capture of power, because whether it is Democrat or military administrators, I think everything is about capturing state power. So when politicians, opposition parties, opposition politicians realize that they can't assess that power through the ballots, there is a possibility that they reach out to their collaborators in military uniform, in the military, to see some form of collaboration to oust civilian authorities. And the reason is simple. Particularly if you look at Benin, for instance, in the past few years, there has been serious clamping down on political opponents, oppositions, and there's a possibility that when the people realize that the civic space is getting strong as a result of such political manipulation, as we've seen elsewhere, evidence abound, then there's a possibility that they reach out to those complices and the military collaborators to possibly subvert constitutional order.
To what extent has a public frustration with corruption, insecurity, and weak state institutions created conditions to make coups easier to happen?
So let's start on the note of data. Generally, even in Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and all these other countries, citizens' interest in democratic governance has never been below 50% in the recent time. In other words, most Africans in those countries prefer to be governed through a democratic government. That is not to say there is no serious democratic deficit within a sub-region. That exists, and people do express their frustration. But the only option that is still left to the people is to go through the ballot, whether it is 4 or 5 years cycle or 7 years or 6 years, then to enforce a change if they so desire. What I think has happened is that the military people take advantage of that citizens' frustration and then seize the reign of power, claiming that, like we said in the Central Sahel states, that the reason why they took over government is because of the failure on the part of the civilian administration to rein in insecurity, provide economic development, and what have you in terms of improved democratic governance, which we call dividends of democracy. But the jury is also out in those places, as we have seen in Mali, Burkina Faso in particular. Those military administrators have not been able to rein in terrorist groups who have been on the rampage in the country. As a matter of fact, particularly in Mali, attacks in the last 5 years of military administration has grown by 430%, according to the Armed Conflict Event Location Database data. So I've gone through this route to say, yes, people express frustration, but none has spoken to the military to say, now we think you are the Messiah that should come and save us, then come through that back door and come and save us. There is nowhere where that is done. Rather, what the military capitalize on is to seize the reign of power by capitalizing on that. And they have failed woefully in delivering governance in places where they have captured in the recent time. So I will anchor on the note that why people might express alternative form of government. And we need to also say that democracy, what separates democracy from military government is not in building rules and infrastructure. Those are very good, like in Nigeria they did when they were in power. But it is the software of democracy, civil liberty, that the military take away from the people that is the real challenge that separates that military administration from civilian administration. Like if we were under military rule, I would not be able to express myself in the media as we are having this conversation.
Michael, I'll come to you. Hopefully we can hear you, especially taking from the fact that Wole kind of emphasized democracy and, democratic rule. Now, if we look at it in layman's terms, democracy is defined as a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. But some observers argue that democratic decline in the region is opening the door for military intervention. Would you say that that is a fair statement?
Well, I think it depends on who we are listening to. Truly, there's democratic decline. And when people say there's a democratic decline, they are looking at two things. One is the dividends of democracy, improvement in the quality of life of the people. I think that has been on decline in most countries in the recent time. In our sub-region, and no country is isolated from that. The second thing is what we are now witnessing, which is like a constitutional coup, in which presidents get into power and start subverting the rule-based system that undergets their emergence in the first place. We've seen that in places where they've subverted the constitution, prolonged their stay in power, like we have seen in Guinea-Bissau, we saw in Guinea-Conakry, and we saw in Guinea-Bissau how Bolu last year actually shut down the parliament. Those are part of the democratic deficit that I believe the military authorities, juntas, when they take over government, that they make as their reference point for taking that action. But we still have to emphasize the fact that they have a very poor record in places where they have actually seized the reign of power and should never, under any guise, be considered as an alternative to democracy, which gives the people the right to choose and elect their leaders and confer legitimacy on such leaders.
Now, let's take a look. With that being said, I want us to just take a look at ECOWAS. There has also been criticism that ECOWAS hasn't been consistent in addressing previous coups. Do you think that inconsistency has helped fuel this trend?
Yes, ECOWAS is just like a congregation of trade unionists, as we've seen in the recent time. We've had the ECOWAS of heads of states but not really so much as ECOWAS of the people of West Africa. So they meet, they can't speak truth to themselves. One of them is subverting powers, and they are looking in other direction, like we saw in Guinea-Bissau and Guinea-Conakry during the days of Alpha Conde. We also saw that in Guinea-Bissau in the recent time. We saw what happened in Togo in the recent time, and ECOWAS pretend that those things are not happening. And I'll give you an example of Senegal, where I live and work. You saw the experience of the last 3 to 4 years before Macky Sall eventually stepped aside, and his party was voted out in the last election. So these are instances in which ECOWAS has not been able to live up to the democratic expectation on the part of the people. But if you look at the statement that they made today, I think maybe we can take it a bit serious, in the sense that in that few paragraphs, I think about 4 paragraphs of a statement, they stated boldly there in that statement that they are going to, if need be, mobilize the ECOWAS standby force. I think that is probably a radical step to at least establish a deterrence, so that others are not going to be taken in that order. But we must say that ECOWAS must become accountable to the people, and they must actually live up to expectation of the people in the region, not issuing statements that probably do not watch the paper on which they are printed after the deed has been done, like we've seen in most places in the recent time. Particularly, a very good example is the Guinea-Bissau.
Let's take a very quick break now, but when we return, we continue with this conversation. Do stay with us. In case you are joining us, you're welcome. My name is Inam, and this is the news at 3 p.m. with News Central. Before the break, we were talking about the recent events in West Africa. I'm joined now also by African Affairs Achike Chude. You're welcome, sir. Mr. Chude, I'll start with you. Now, let's look at the recent events. With what just happened in Benin, what does it say about the wider political stability in the West African region?
I think it means a lot for the West African sub-region and to Africa at large. Like you mentioned in your intro, we are seeing a resurgence of coup that was characteristic of the experience of the 1960s, and which is reminiscent in a way, in the sense that even places that look to have a different political trajectory, we've also seen coup, like in Madagascar, and the one that the former president of Nigeria, President Goodluck Jonathan, described as a ceremonial coup in Guinea-Bissau in the past few days. So I think it's seriously rolling back the democratic gains of the past 2 decades. And it should be a source of concern to anybody that is interested in political stability in a region, because I think if you look broadly about the potential consequences of this rollback of democratic governance in the region, this is a region that is already trapped in serious security crises, cascading down from the Central Sahel to the littoral states of West Africa. And if we now had a new layer of political instability to that, it's going to spell serious economic disruption in an ailing region that is trying to find its footings already. So it has a very serious economic, social, and political consequences, except we really try to roll back the mayhem.
Now, Wole, do you think that these development points to a deeper legitimacy crisis for democratic governments across West Africa?
Yes, it's a deeper legitimacy crisis in the sense that we're seeing the incumbent trying to stage what I consider as constitutional coup. Look at how the political crisis in Senegal linger for almost 2 to 3 years in the past, in the recent time. Even the Benin that we're talking about, opposition, there is a serious clamping down on opposition in which some have been condemned to prison. And once people see that, it's put into serious question the legitimacy that the incumbent party actually have to govern the people. But like I've said in all my intervention on this program, we should not, under any guise, then now see military administration as an alternative to democratic government. What I think we need to do is to make our democracy more accountable and inclusive, and then open up the space for greater participation and deliver on dividends of democracy. And people are not going to consider the military as an alternative in any way. And like I said, they have failed woefully in terms of all performance indicators in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger in the recent time.
Right. Now, luckily, we've managed to have all our other guests. I'll start with you, Achike. Achike, you are an African affairs analyst. So now, if we're looking at Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and now Benin, what key lessons should other governments in the region be taking seriously right now?
Yeah, well, I think the issue is, when it happens, we want to look at what to do about maybe the coup that has taken place. How do we resolve it and all that? But we forget that the root cause of these coups, are very important. If you want to stop it, then you have to get to the root cause. You have to ask why it is happening. Obviously, military rule is an aberration, but the reality is that when you look at even the performance of ECOWAS over the years, you realize that what we are seeing is the demystification of the regional body, is the demise of ECOWAS. From 16 members previously, they lost, was it Madagascar, one of the countries then, they lost 3, and then they are losing, then they lost 4, and then they lost Guinea-Bissau recently, and then if the coup succeeds, they've lost about 6 in a period of about 3 years. So what that tells you is that ECOWAS is unraveling and unraveling fast. Now, the issue is this, and when you look at it, you find out that the problem is even with the regional body to a very large extent. Yes, the inability of the political leadership in these countries to deliver forms the basis on which the military build the platform for coups. But the truth is that, if you look at the response of ECOWAS to some of this misgovernance that's been going on, you have the impression that ECOWAS does not like military dictatorships, but they are very, very, at home and comfortable with civilian dictatorship. If you look at the ousted president of Guinea-Bissau, looking at the fact that what has happened in Guinea-Bissau is a palace coup, as attested to by Goodluck Jonathan, the former Nigerian president, you realize that around in 2022 or so, he had dissolved parliament. What constitutional powers does he have to dissolve parliament because he has a disagreement? Eventually, the ECOWAS did not, obviously. In 2024, there were new elections. Another parliament came in place, and he had disagreements with that parliament, and he dissolved it. Now, that is not the attitude of a democrat. It's the attitude of a crass dictator. And then in Cote d'Ivoire, you also have Alassane Ouattara also removing the 2-term limit to presidential power, giving himself more power, just like we have in Cameroon. So these are the basis on which these coups take place. The issue, and then beyond that again, is the issue of absolute non-performance. The people see nothing to you get them enamored to democratic governance. So it's easy for us to just make statements about the aberration of military intervention in the politics of a country. We can shout from now till tomorrow, but the bottom line is that most of the citizens in these countries do not understand the danger of having military people determine their political future and their political direction. They don't understand that. It's just a few people within the elites, in the country that understand the absolute danger of a military intervention in the politics of a country, of countries in West Africa. Most don't understand. All they want to hear, all they want to know is that we're beginning to see some dividends of democracy. And so you can see that in all of this, as they say, the voice of the people is the voice of God. Whenever military coups take place in these countries, in Guinea, in Burkina Faso, and so on, there's a general acceptance by the very people, that are supposed to lose the most when a military government comes in place. So they appeal to the people, and the people seem to welcome them. Of course, at the end of the day, it's going to bite back at the people. And because obviously the soldiers are not going to stay for long. Sooner than later, they are going to have frictions, and then they have to bear their thanks to the same people that have welcomed them. And so we're back to square one. We can no longer continue to tolerate the misgovernance that is going on in West Africa simply because it is better than military, coups, or the military taking over the political future of their countries. We can no longer continue to allow that. And so what you see is ECOWAS made up of former military boys. Whether you're talking about Togo and many other parts of West Africa, a lot of them have been in the military. A lot of them now come to power and under the guise of, being civilians, and then begin this, process of misruling, of misrule, and then they're creating crisis upon crisis, dividing the public along ethnic lines and all that. This is what the civilian governments do.
Yes.
So in as much as we condemn it, and we continue to condemn it strenuously, yeah. But the truth is that we cannot, in as much as we have this negative attitude towards military coup, we must have very negative, position towards the misgovernance by the civilians, who are also dictators in their own right. They do not allow elections in the first place, proper elections. So these are the things that breed the reasons on which the military adventurers hang their position on why they have taken over power. We cannot continue to allow that.
I'd like to build off of what you said and throw this question to Michael, because in summary, basically what I'm getting from what you are saying is that more than anything, people are desperate for a government and a body of people that works, that doesn't just work for them, but works for the people. And with that being said, Michael, my question to you is that to what extent has public frustration with corruption, with insecurity, and of course a weak state institution created conditions that make coups easier to happen right now?